Okay, riders, Moto Journo Kris here. I thought I'd talk about dual sports to follow up on my last video talking about whether an adventure bike, a beginner adventure bike, is a good first option for you, and where I said the adventure bike is a really flexible, great utility machine that is going to work for the vast majority of riders. I would say dual sports are the opposite. In actual fact, if you are getting started on a dual sport, they actually do offer quite a bit of utility depending on your tire choice in particular. If you haven't got real knobbies on the bike, you're probably going to find the road side of things quite fun and quite easy as well. The dual sports are lighter. They have, generally speaking, quite good fuel economy. They, like the adventure bikes, have a little bit of, they carry a little bit of a premium over what you might expect for the specifications of the bike. They do have very, very long suspension travel and lots of ground clearance, and that is because they are primarily off-road bikes which are plated for road use as well, so that you can ride to your trails and have your fun off-road. But most of these dual sport bikes, even if we talk about something up to like a DIZ 400, they are limited on power. Now the DIZ 400, if we talk about the contemporary kind of bikes like the KX250, I think the L's the plated version, the WR250R, not the F, the R, the CRF 300 Rally or the 250 Rally or the L version of either of those bikes. If we're talking about those machines, while the DIZ 400 is kind of the top of the power and the torque in those offerings, most of these bikes are considered fairly underpowered. I think they've got about 20 to 30 horsepower, where a lot of the road bikes in comparison are 40, 45 even. So they do offer significantly more performance, and obviously these are generally single cylinders, or they're always single cylinders, and they're a bit more of quite an off-road style single cylinder, unlike the much more road-orientated versions that we see on the KTM RCs. And the 390s, I should say, and the 401s from Husqvarna. So when we're talking about who the dual sport is ideal for, it's a much more niche group of riders, I would say, than most other style of bikes, because of the trade-offs you're making as far as the road ability, which if you're doing pure off-roading or very like a high percentage of off-roading, these are going to be a great choice. If you're thinking about maybe doing a sumo conversion, they can be a great option as well. And obviously you do get kind of the crossover between the two different styles of bikes with an easy wheel swap and tire swap. However, they just don't have the widespread appeal. And I think there's a lot of people who are kind of upset or sad, I guess you'd say, that we haven't seen a new generation of this style of bike. The WR250R has been discontinued. I think the DIZ 400E has been discontinued as well, even though it's still on sale here in Australia. We've seen some new offerings that kind of straddle between the adventure and the off-road side of things, but nothing as light as these more traditional dual sports. So there seems to be a category which may be dying out a little bit.
And it is of course important to note I'm talking about the longer service interval dual sports here, rather than the machines that fall far more into the competition enduro or motocross categories, or even the larger capacity bikes like the KTM 690 Enduro or Husqvarna 701 Enduro, which are probably too much for a beginner rider.
So as far as talking about the dual sports, I don't think they have the widespread appeal of the adventure bikes, or even, you know, the Super Sport 300 style machines that are quite popular with beginners, or the naked bikes which tend to appeal to everyone, or even cruisers. The dual sports, because they are generally speaking a bit of a plated off-road motorcycle, they're suited to a very specific kind of rider. Now, certainly if you're out in the country, the plated dirt bikes tend to be much more popular for the people who are doing a heap of off-roading, and that is probably what's keeping them alive. But these lower powered dual sport options seem to be fading from popularity somewhat, as we see plated off-road, pure off-road bikes becoming a bit more popular, and certainly offering a lot more performance than the dual sports. Better suspension often than the dual sports as well. They're just a more decked out and kind of more competition spec'd machine compared to these more traditional old dual sports, which are a lot more limited in that regard. And so while I chose a WR250R because it was the kind of bike I could ride really over everything, what it didn't have in performance, it had in ease of riding. I just really do love this machine, but I have to remember that it's the kind of bike that appeals to a very specific kind of rider. And certainly there are people who try a dual sport like this and they just go, it's not fast enough. Whether that's on the road or off-road, they might not find it's comfortable enough, which is certainly a pretty fair kind of complaint, because I have a comfort seat that I put on this when I go for longer rides. It's not the most comfortable if you're just sitting down. Obviously off-road you're normally standing up, so that's a different thing entirely. But these are not going to appeal to everyone, and there's a good reason for that. And really, you might have to have a bit of trial and error to decide whether you'd be happy with a machine like this, a CRF 300 Rally, DRZ 400. Certainly the DRZ 400Es have always been a really, really good value option on the second-hand market for someone interested in getting into the dual sport side of things. And one of the good things about that particular bike as well is they're considered pretty bulletproof. And as I said, very, very good value, generally speaking, buying them second-hand, where some of the other options seem to hold their value a little bit more and certainly don't offer the performance that the DRZ 400 has always been quite renowned for. So, is a dual sport for you? I'd be a little bit more careful of a dual sport as your first motorcycle choice, unless you're quite sure that you're doing a fair bit of off-roading or you want to do a sumo build. I think, generally speaking, while the bikes are amazing for what they do well, which I've had a lot of fun going on some adventure rides with people, and I wouldn't do it on any other machine. Certainly I wouldn't upgrade to like a Tenere 700 or an 890 Adventure or anything like that, even though those are amazing machines and those push into the adventure segment. For me, this is kind of the perfect machine and I'm really, really happy with it. However, it's a little bit more of a niche choice, and as a result, you know, I don't go around saying everyone should buy one of these, where say a naked bike, I think pretty much everyone could start on one of those bikes quite happily and not have any issues at all, and then obviously figure out specifically what they want down the track. A dual sport will probably be disappointing for some riders, and we want to avoid that if possible. So if you've got any questions about dual sports and kind of my thoughts around them, or if you've got any concerns or are trying to figure out if it's the right bike for you, let me know down below in the comments. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Hopefully other viewers can also kind of give their opinion, because obviously you really want a nice wide variety of views to figure out where you fit in the motorcycling spectrum of what you're going to like and what you want to ride long term, what kind of riding you're doing, and just figuring that out in the early stages is, or at least kind of narrowing it down a little bit, is going to be advantageous for you. Because I will say one thing is, if you started on a WR250R and you really enjoyed what it does so well, like the single trail stuff, and you know, even like people do a lot of camping and stuff on these kind of bikes and do longer trips, a lot of people then add a bigger bike or another type of bike to the garage, and if you're keeping this machine as a long-termer, then it could be quite a good investment. But you don't really know if that's the case if you've got no experience and no mates who ride who might be able to give you a bit of an idea what you should be looking at. But anyway, stay safe out there, have a good one, I'll be back soon.